Hey guys, how's it going? Came across this on Reddit today, whether or not this person should work at a startup versus a large company, first job out of college. So this is the key here, as your first job, or at least your first software job. So I want to get into that today. My name is Dan Kwan. I'm a full stack software engineer. Been working as a consultant now for about 8 years. This is 2020 and I started in 2012. Building out software solutions for corporate enterprises, dev shops, stuff like that, and a lot of startups. So did a lot of startup work for the first half of my career, and lately I've been doing a lot of corporate work, so enterprise work and universities and stuff like that. So I have a pretty good perspective on both sides now, and so I think I can answer this question in depth. So yeah. Oh, if you're wondering about this, we're under lockdown right now. I haven't been able to see my barber in several months, so my hair keeps falling in front of my face. Makes it very distracting to keep doing this. So I just gave up and put this thing on, and that explains this. So okay. So all right, let's get into it. Startup versus large company. So when I first started software engineering professionally in 2012, I did almost exclusively startup work. Lots of early stage startups in New York City. That's where I lived at the time. 2-man teams, 5-man teams. A big team would have been 10. That was a tough experience. So the thing about startups is by definition, it lacks definition. There's typically a lack of procedures and processes. It's not as bureaucratic. There's a lot less structure in a startup. And oftentimes, if you're walking into a startup as a software engineer, part of your job is to establish that structure. That's part of what you do, or that's part of what they're hoping you do, and that could lead to a lot of sticky situations. So when I was first starting out, like I said, I did almost all startup work, and I just didn't understand anything. I was just really bad. I didn't understand how version control worked. I didn't understand how Git commits worked. I would do really dumb things like putting like hundreds of commits or hundreds of lines of code changes into one commit. I was dealing with someone who did that today, and it reminded me of when I did that 8 years ago, and I was like, why? That's so dumb. Like, how did I get this job? How did I get this far? And so that happened today with one of the junior engineers I work with, and I had to explain to him, like, this is why we need you to break this up into a couple dozen commits so I can see why you're doing all these different things before I let it pass code review. Code review, that's another thing that a lot of times they just don't have that going on in startups because they don't have anything going on. They don't have any process. So startups lack process, procedure, at least in a software standpoint. And if you're right out of college like this person, or boot camp, or just entering the industry in general, you don't know what you don't know, right? So you don't know that these things are missing, and so you don't know that you're not getting the education that you need to improve. You're not growing as a software engineer, and so you end up doing something for a long time, and maybe you're getting better strictly as a programmer. That's probably true, especially if you're dealing with tough problems. But you're not getting better as an engineer, meaning that you're not getting better at work collaborating with big teams, big code bases, several stakeholders, PMs, the founder, investors. Dealing with all of this is part of the game. It's just part of the game at the advanced levels, at least. And that's, you don't learn that at a small company that doesn't have these processes strictly laid out. So I made a lot of mistakes. A lot of them were like indelible mistakes, like burn bridges type of things, where it's like I fucked up so bad, like I can't like reach out to this company anymore, and I'm fine now, but that's something that's a risk you take going into like an undefined environment, a startup environment. That's different if the startup already has a dev team with these processes strictly in place and enforced. And you learn from that. And that's the biggest part of the corporate environment that you're just gonna learn. You're just gonna have to conform to. The corporate environment is much more about conformity and the bureaucracy and like respecting the process. So with the corporate environments, like, we had Scrum meetings every day, 9:15 a.m. every day, no exceptions. Even when the Scrum Master wasn't there, the lead dev would step up and be the Scrum Master for the day. The Scrum meeting would be over by 9:30, no exceptions. It was just over by 9:30. We would have our ticket grooming every Tuesday, 4 p.m. Before the end of the sprint, which is usually the next Wednesday. Just etc. And this is just how it went down, and and certain things had to happen in these meetings. They just had to happen. Sometimes, it was overkill too. Like, it wasn't all good. Like, a lot of times the meetings, we would have meetings to plan for other meetings. Like, the meetings kind of went overboard, depending on the company. But I'm thinking of one in particular that just like, man, the meetings were just, it's a lot of meetings. And dealing with the PMs, not that you have to deal with them, like, almost all the PMs I worked with were like great and very friendly, and I liked working with them. But like, understanding how to work with PMs is a better way to put it. I don't want to say dealing with them with their problem. It's understanding how to work with PMs, how to communicate with PMs, product managers, how to deal again, how to work with your tech lead, how to communicate with your team members. These are all very important skills, invaluable skills that you learn in a corporate environment that you may or may not get in a startup environment, depending on the startup, right? If you have a startup that's seed funded, 6 people working out of their garage, 4 of them are marketing people and 2 of them are like whatever interns, and then you're the software dev, or like maybe it's you and one other person, and that other person doesn't know what he's doing either, right? And so you have a situation where it's the blind leading the blind, and that's you're not going to grow in that environment, or at least not in a good way. So the growth factor is much faster in a corporate environment, especially if you're raw, if you're new. Again, unless the startup is led by a strong tech team. So you get a lot of startups that are founded by tech people. They're essentially tech startups. Like, they're founded by tech people, and they're developer first. They're developer focused first, and that's a good environment to learn in. So it really depends on that situation. But in a corporate environment, it's pretty much like you're gonna have to, you're gonna learn that no matter what. Corporate environment, like I said earlier, it's all about meetings and scheduling. Our meetings were scheduled down to the minute, and 9:30 the meeting's over, everyone's out. The structure was very clearly defined. Corporate environment, the code bases are typically monstrosities, just a hellish mess of just different systems working together, usually not working effectively together. Legacy code bases communicating with the new code base that's not conforming to the API, and all sorts of crazy stuff. You got teams working with different teams in different time zones. The corporate environment that I'm thinking of right now, we had maybe about a dozen teams. Each team consisted of about 15 or so people. So we're talking close to 200 people, and we're talking like by a team is like a couple PMs, your software engineers, your Scrum Master. This is all a team, and these teams were very isolated pods of developers. So I would talk to one other team, and like it would be like talking to a different person in a different country, but we all worked for the same company, and so being able to sort of collaborate across what they called cross-functional teams is a skill. That's something you have to learn in a corporate environment. It's an important skill. You learn to get better at communication in these situations. You just have to communicate. You have to communicate effectively. You have to understand how to deal with conflict, how to deal with unexpected situations. It's just that's the corporate environment. One thing I liked about the corporate environments were at 5 o'clock, the day was over. I liked that. That was fun. You show up at 9, sometimes 9:30, depending on the company. Sometimes you leave at 5:30, but they don't expect you to dedicate your life, which is nice. People just 501 people are just on their way out, and I like that. Startups, not so much. You have to they expect you to like put in all your free time to the startup, and I don't do that. So yeah, from a developer standpoint, where can you grow more as a new engineer? I would say corporate first, especially if it's a good corporate situation. Obviously like a Google would be fantastic. There's no downsides there, but even if it's a corporate environment, like a media company, like I don't know, like a newspaper, or like a TV studio, like if you're in New York, maybe it's a NBC. That's fine. You're still going to learn a lot there. Or maybe it's working for like the NBA. That's pretty cool. Or working for like a studio in Hollywood. I don't know, whatever. You'll get a lot of good experience there. However, if you can get into a startup situation where it's developer centric, where the founder or founders are very good technical people, then you're going to learn even more there. That would be where I would go in that, if given that opportunity as an entry level dev. So let's say it's someone like Dan Abramov, who is the creator of Redux, and I believe he also wrote the Context API, because the similarities are pretty high. Let's say he's just like, all right, I'm done with this Facebook job. I want to start my own company. Who's coming with me? And then you are able to like get your foot in the door there. Take it. That's a no-brainer. Take it. But if it's just some Joe Schmo startup founded by 2, 3, 4 knuckleheads who think they can start the next Facebook for dogs, that's not a good first job. That you will not grow as a developer there. So, whereas in a good corporate environment, pretty much any corporate environment, even like a JP Morgan or that kind of thing, like, which is nothing to do with tech, but it's a good tech job. You'll grow fast, and you'll have a good, strong foundation after 2 or 3 years of that, and then it'll broaden your options. So that's the way I would look at it for this. This is the one thing I would do differently. One of the things I would do differently in my own personal career. First, like 4 years. So I started in 2012 professionally. 12, 13, 14, 15. Yeah, about 4 years. The first 4 years is almost exclusively startups and a couple what's called dev shops. But even those dev shops like only worked with startups. What I learned in those 4 years, I probably could have learned in about 2 if I was in a good corporate environment. I just had like an anti-corporate kind of like, I was just like down with the man. I'm going to do my own thing. I was an idiot. After having gone through a couple corporate situations in my freelance work, it's I'm fine now. I don't look at it the same way. My corporate experience I value very much now. I met a lot of great people, a lot of smart people. The smartest people I met were in the corporate environments, and they were also very driven. And if you work in a team that's very driven and capable, it makes you that way. You just have to be that way. There's no place to hide. You have to be that way, and you just get better. So that's the answer to that. So if you're kind of split between wondering the same thing, this is how I look at it. If you have any thoughts on this yourself, or any agree, disagree, whatever, please leave a comment. Let me know. And yeah, that's it. All right. So thanks for watching. See you in the next video.